Hello, everyone. This is Volts for March 18th, 2026. A Tesla vet tries to master the VPP market. I'm your host, David Roberts. Volts listeners will recall that back in July of 2024, I sat down with the founders of Base Power, a startup that sells customers large residential batteries for minimal cost and in return manages those batteries as a virtual power plant, or VPP. That approach has proven extremely popular with investors, as evidenced by the fact that roughly a year later, Base Power raised a cool $1 billion in further funding. Last month brought news of another splashy fundraise from a company in this space, with California-based startup Lunar Energy raising $232 million in new funding. Lunar's business is akin to Base's. It sells customers battery systems and then operates those systems as a VPP. But there are a few things that set it apart, including a tight focus on hardware-software integration. One of the most notable things about the 6-year-old company is that it was founded and is run by Kunal Girotra. Girotra is well known in Silicon Valley as a longtime hardware veteran. Among other notable chapters in his career, he helped start and run Tesla's residential energy business, which he led until he left the company in 2020. What did he learn at Tesla that he is taking into this new venture? What sets Lunar's batteries and VPPs apart from so many others flooding into this space? What is the future of the VPP business? I am thrilled to have Girotra with me today so that we can dig into all of that and more. With no further ado, Kunal Girotra, welcome to Volts. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, David, for having me, and thanks for the intro.
Ton to dig into here, but I would love to start at Tesla. I think these days, listeners probably have a variety of associations in their head regarding Tesla, but this is about Tesla's residential energy biz, which I think is viewed in the industry as pretty top-notch. You stood that business up early. Those are early days for all this. So I'm just curious what you learned starting and running that business at Tesla that you are bringing to Lunar. What did you think you could do better on your own?
As you rightly said, Tesla, at least Tesla's Powerwall product was, set the foundation for a product that could be deployed in people's homes. And in some ways, you can, credit them for starting that journey where putting batteries in homes became a possibility. So that was a good thing. But I think the reason I left Tesla and I started Lunar was, there are 75 million homes in the US alone. And while Tesla was on a path to build their products and deploy, there are a few differences that I saw that Lunar could tap into and actually create a much bigger impact than Tesla has. And a couple of them are Lunar's not a battery company only. We're a electrification company. Every OEM or company trying to make hardware, Tesla including, was trying to focus on a widget that somebody else would make the battery, a third-party company would make the inverter, a fourth would have a smart panel, somebody else would have a heat pump. What Lunar saw and what I saw was that the home was going to be electric. And yes, the start of that is generation, solar, generation, storage, and control. But then you need a company to make a complete ecosystem of products so customers don't have to piece together 5 different apps, and installers don't have to spend a lot of time installing these things in homes. This should become like an appliance and something that is really plug and play. So Lunar's approach was to make a differentiated hardware platform, and I can go into how our product is differentiated from, say, Tesla's. and take an ecosystem approach. So our first product is the Lunar system, which takes care of generation. We have module level power electronics that go behind the solar panels to generate more energy from the solar. And then we have storage, which is a modular battery system, not a monolith that Tesla has, which means it can scale in a person's home.
One of the things that I think sets you apart here is that you are making your own batteries. You are designing and manufacturing your own batteries. These are not just sort of commodity batteries, but you're also designing this software integrated into the home and into VPPs. What's interesting about Lunar, I think, is that you sell the battery and the software as a system, but you also will just sell the battery and also will just sell the software. Like these are separable products. They come as a package, but you can sell either one. Like you can just sell software to people who have other hardware installed. So you're sort of like a both and.
Yeah, I was going to get to that difference as well. Is like the hardware is differentiated on the software side. And I describe this analogy. Think of us on the hardware side as the Apple of the home. We want to build neatly integrated products for the home that consumers can use and enjoy and get benefit from. On the software side, think of us as the Android, where we connect with any battery out there. And then we provide this enterprise software platform to customers which are not homeowners. Those are third party operators like Sunrun or utilities or retailers.
Right.
So that is a big differentiator to your earlier question of how I do things differently than Tesla or others is like very few or rather no OEMs to my record do both.
Yeah.
Most OEMs either make a hardware and say you got to control my hardware with my software, or I only do software, and then they lose the granularity, I think, of how they control hardware. So I can talk through the differentiator, but you nailed it. Our software, enterprise software, is agnostic to devices.
I wonder if you've ever had any pushback or sort of questions from investors along the lines of, it's really hard to be a good hardware company and it's really hard to be a good software company. And you are trying to be a good one of both. Is that not somewhat crazy? Like, what is it? Have you not had some pushback? Like, why not just hone in on the one thing you're really super good at?
Yeah, I think that, as someone told me, if some investors tell you you're crazy, that probably means you're onto something. So I think that's a fair point, and I'll tell you why we think we're good at both and how, as a company, we approach that. So when we started Lunar, it was clear that Lunar had to do both to be successful, and our thesis is working out. People are responding really well to our combined strategy. The approach we took was hardware will build from the ground up, which is what we did. We hired a great team, a lot of ex-Tesla veterans. We have a full-on R&D lab in Mountain View, California. We design, build everything from the ground up. Every product that we deploy is Lunar IP and differentiated IP. So on the hardware, we're doing on our own. On the software, I had the same choice, but instead of striving a team, building it, I looked around and found the best company and team to acquire and made them a part of Lunar. So that's what accelerated our software journey. And the company we acquired was a company called Moixa out of UK. They had a platform called GridShare. And as you might know very well, the markets in UK and Europe and Japan are much more advanced and deregulated than US. So these guys had done all the hard stuff that we ever could imagine with behind the meter batteries controlling 50,000 devices in Japan alone, home batteries, and have 850 million runtime hours of doing this software. So we acquired them, and that team sits in London. And that software we brought into the US 3 years ago, and now it's running across TPOs and energy retailers in California. We're now going into Texas. So to your point, to build everything from scratch is hard and takes a lot of time. So we took this approach of build a hardware, because that's hard to buy a company, because nobody except Tesla was building good hardware. And then on the software, we acquired this company. And I think now we have a great job managing those two efforts. And I'll pause here because I tend to go into long explanations. So before you let me run off, you want me to pause, I
I
guess.
think
So.
I think I have an audience uniquely welcome to long rambles,
Okay.
but well, I'll cut in anyway. So let's start with the hardware. So you're selling a system. The first question is this system, it's a battery system with an inverter that is meant to be attached to a solar system, right? It's not freestanding. You can't just install one of these systems freestanding. You are installing it either with a solar PV array or attaching it to an existing solar PV array. Is that right?
That is not correct.
Oh,
So it actually is the way I describe people is, I mean, it does what you said and more. It can do freestanding, and we have deployed freestanding systems as well.
hmm.
So the use cases I describe is if you go to a home, you don't have solar, you can use solar and batteries, solar and lunar. This is how I call it. Give people solar and lunar. If a home has solar already, you can give them a lunar system, which gets only storage. If you have a solar system in a home and you have an old solar, very small, 2-3 kilowatts, you want to add more solar and lunar, you can do that too. And lunar plays really well. And lastly, if you have a home where you have no solar and you don't want solar, just batteries, you can do that too. It's the
You
most
can do that.
you 100% you can do that. We've deployed. There's not a whole lot of demand of that in California, but as you go
Yeah,
into
that's more of a Texas thing, right?
yeah, and we are going into Texas now, and we're working with energy retailers to deploy that model to do energy arbitrage and sort of day trading with the wholesale market. But there is no limitation, and that's the beauty about our hardware platform. It's the most flexible platform where I focus on use cases. Like making the hardware for the first 3 years was the hard part, but now it's a software product because the hardware exists and I can deploy all sorts of firmware and software to make it do cool things. The only thing it doesn't do, then that's intentional, is it doesn't provide solar only. Even though we have an inverter, we have intentionally deprioritized use cases where customer says, I only want to do solar only.
Well, you don't sell solar. You don't sell the PV, right? You have a partners
Well,
that
I
do.
don't sell the panels, but I make the module level power electronics. I make the inverter. So I could, in theory, sell solar and say, well, use my inverter for just solar as a grid tied mechanism with the grid. But that's a use case I've intentionally deprioritized. The reason being, Lunar was started with the belief that batteries are the sort of the foundation for the electric home.
For sure.
Some people think a smart panel is a foundation, some people think solar is a foundation. We believe that home batteries are the foundation for electrifying the home, and that's why solar pairing was important, but we don't do anything without batteries. That's the main message, but we do all use cases.
And your battery, the battery itself is interesting in that you, as you say, if you buy a Powerwall from Tesla, you just get the one big unit. You all have designed smaller modules that you can stack, basically. So you can create a battery of relatively precise size. How big are those modules?
Yeah, these modules are 5 kilowatt hour each, and you need two modules to make the system operate. So you need a minimum of 10 kilowatt hours on site, but it also expands to 30 kilowatt hours, all behind one inverter, which is a 9.6 kilowatt inverter.
So 30 kilowatt, that's the max you can get behind the one inverter.
Behind one inverter, but then you can stack multiple systems all the way up to 300 kilowatt hours. So you can make it and we are targeting small commercial very soon where we can go into offices and buildings and give that. But for residences, 20 to 30 behind one is our most popular configuration. We started off with 20, meaning 4 blocks. Later last year, we launched to expansion to 30, and now we can do all the way to 300 as well. So our vision is to continue to expand this into any use case. And as you know, homes are snowflakes, is what I call them. Every home has its own unique requirement of like, What kind of wall do they have? Do they have space outside?
Where are your batteries? Are these meant to be outside, inside, on the wall, on the ground? What's the
Yeah, so that like, again, I would use the word the most flexible, although flexibility is used in the VPP aspect, but this is the most flexible battery system you'll find out there, meaning you can install it in the garage or outdoors. If you install it outdoors and you're worried about cold temperature, don't worry, we have heaters inside that can warm the battery up and make sure you can install in the New England winter. It's wall mounted, but you can also floor mount it. It's the most flexible system. You can submerge it in a meter of water if it's flooded and it'll still keep operating. So we call it the beauty and the beast. It looks pretty awesome because we believe, like Apple, you need to have products that homeowners are proud of. It doesn't need to be expensive to make it look good. You just need to have a design philosophy. And then the beast because performance is really high performing and you would never have to worry about, this battery going bad or not surviving the extreme environments in various parts of the country.
I saw in an early piece that you were using NMC chemistry, but then when I looked at the spec sheet you all sent me, it says LFP. Did you make that switch? I'm curious when that switch happened and why.
We started off with the NMC chemistry, and you're right. And as of late last year, we have now officially switched to LFP chemistry.
For safety or performance?
No, it's all for cost.
Uh,
Safety is, and there's a myth in my mind in the market that LFP is safer than NMC. I think it's for people like me who've worked on battery systems their entire life, they will all tell you it's a myth because safety is a function of chemistry plus system design. So if you design your system well, like you have millions of cars on the road parked in garages, all using NMC chemistry, where so people have 200 kilowatt hours of electric cars parked in homes, very safe, and they drive all around, all NMC chemistry. The reason is the system design allows that. For the ESS makers, nobody wants to prioritize the engineering work it needs to make NMC successful. Lunar did that. Ours is the safest battery with NMC. Unfortunately, the cost was just LFP prices just went to a direction where, as someone who's has to deploy a lot of systems and have to be practical about it, I was just like, cost is where LFP wins, hands down.
as I understand it, there is a slight performance hit though on energy intensity. Did you lose a
Great
little
question.
volumetric?
So, you know the details of this. So, yeah, there's a 30% energy density loss on a cell level. But remember that NMC requires a lot of, as you said, safety design, which takes a lot of space. And so when you remove that for LFP, we actually ended up in the same exact 5 kilowatt
Oh,
hour
interesting.
form factor.
That's
So
funny.
for an end customer, they don't really care because it's literally the same product and the same output of energy. So that's why this nuance, whether it's NMC, LFP, only certain installers care. But for the end customer, it's a 5 kilowatt hour system. It did not change. Performance is the same. Our just cost got better.
Another thing that you sort of boast about your batteries is that the inverter is integrated. Can you explain what that means and why it's significant?
Yeah, so the inverter is the brains of the system, right? It's the thing that orchestrates the power control, converts power from DC to AC, has a lot of sophisticated controls in it. So we believed making that in-house was the first requirement. Most companies try to go to China or somewhere and white label it or white label stuff. We were like, no, we've got to make that. That's the core. So that's number one. Any power electronics is made by Lunar. The integrated inverter means that when you install a Lunar system, you go to a wall, you put these mounting brackets first, and then you put the 5 kilowatt hour blocks, just like Lego blocks, you install them. And then on the top is the inverter module. And then you have these covers that go on top of the system. So to a customer, it looks like a complete integrated system. Whereas in the past, again, outside of Tesla, the way people were selling these systems was buy a dumb battery from someone else with some DC or BMS, buy an inverter from a third party, and there would be two different things on the wall with lots of wire and conduit. And what we have done is just said, okay, this is for the end customer. If you think about a homeowner, most people don't know what a kilowatt is, what an inverter battery is. So for them, this is a Lunar system But for the really detailed people like you and the installers, well, if you look at behind what the Lunar system is, it's an inverter on the top, which is a DC coupled system. It takes solar and battery both. And then underneath the inverter are 5 kilowatt hour battery blocks, which have their own integrated DC DC.
But when I saw the picture of the system on a wall, there are two boxes.
Great point.
What is that second box? If the inverter is in the main box with the batteries, what is that second box and what is it doing?
The second box is the Lunar bridge. We call it the bridge because it's the bridge between the utility and the home. What I mean by that is that box it's not an inverter, you can call it a circuit breaker panel. It's a circuit breaker panel that we provide.
Is it meant to replace your existing circuit breaker panel?
It can, again, going to the world of flexibility, you can choose to replace it as your main circuit breaker panel, or you could choose to keep it as your sub panel. It is your choice, because going back to the homes are snowflakes, some homes require you to relocate loads. And when you relocate loads, when you install a battery system, they often install sub panels. And so our point was, well, you're relocating loads, just give them a circuit breaker panel, reduce the number of boxes, let them install these in the Lunar bridge itself. So in those cases, when you relocate all your loads, yes, the Lunar bridge becomes your main panel. But in the use cases where the meter and the main in a home, like in the East Coast home, are separate, you install the Lunar bridge in between, you don't do any load relocation. So that is also an option.
And this is all stuff that installers will understand and appreciate this. The homeowner doesn't have to.
Homeowner benefits from fewer boxes. If you talk to a lot of homeowners who got battery systems so far from other competitors, the one thing they'll complain is the pictures look very beautiful with one box.
Right.
But when I get these things installed, I get a wall full of shit on my, pardon my French, on the wall. So our Lunar's objective was, you gotta minimize the stuff on the wall, make it look elegant, vertically stack everything, have just two boxes, and we've achieved that goal very well. And this, to finalize, the circuit breaker panel is not just a circuit breaker panel. It has a relay which disconnects the utility from the grid, which is necessary once the utility loses power and there's an outage.
Islanding.
The islanding is what it does. And then the third thing it does is also, it has smart breakers where you can now install individual smart breakers that you can control certain loads in the home. Instead of a full smart panel, now you give them a ability to turn off the most big loads that you really care you want to turn off if there's an extended outage. So that's why I say generation, storage, control, everything provided by Lunar.
I did a whole episode a few years ago on digital circuit breakers. I don't know if listeners will recall this, but like existing circuit breakers, most circuit breakers out in the world are physical. I don't know if people appreciate this. They're literally like little spring-loaded physical devices, which is wild that our whole grid is depending on these little things. But a digital circuit breaker replaces. There's no moving parts, which means it's faster, it's more precise, and you can put programming in it. You can put a computer in it, basically, instead of it being a physical device. Fascinating stuff. I recommend people go back and listen to that whole episode on digital circuit breakers. It opens up a whole world of interesting stuff. So when I buy the system, I get a big box on my wall full of battery modules and an inverter module on top. I get a circuit breaker on my wall. And then the other part is these little widgets that you're attaching to the solar panels. What are those?
Yeah, those widgets are called maximizers, and they are essentially DC-DC converters that attach behind every solar panel. And the purpose of those are, you are entering an era where people are putting a lot of solar on their home. They're maxing out because solar panels are becoming cheap. So they're putting a lot of panels in homes, and they're putting it in all sorts of roof planes that are cut up, and they're not in one plane. So if you have a alternative to our maximizers, the alternative to convert power from DC solar to AC is a string inverter, where
I've heard of those.
You connect everything in a string of series in parallel, and the maximum power point tracking for that string happens at the inverter level, meaning if one panel is on a wrong plane, or if one panel has a bird dropping or a shade, then the entire string behaves as poorly as that one panel. So that is how, 20 years ago, string inverters were. Most people had that. Now, module level power electronics, and this is not, I mean, Lunar has made it better, but there are other companies who did this. Enphase, SolarEdge, they have a different version of that, but they do that too, where we take this maximizer, which maximizes the output on a per panel basis. So that if one panel goes bad because of putting in a different plane, or a shade, or the sun, there's a orientation is different, it doesn't impact the other 20 or 15 panels on that. And that becomes quite important as you install a lot more solar in a lot more tricky planes of the house. So it gives anywhere from 2 to 10% more energy than a string inverter.
Interesting.
I believe that every homeowner should be maximizing the energy and the electrons that come out of the solar, and this is a good way to do that. So why did we make that? Is because, again, you want to give the customer an integrated experience, and you can't buy stuff from other people's hardware and try to just do software integration. That becomes extremely hard. So you've got to decide some pieces that you take ownership of and say, to give this fantastic experience, I need to build the electronics on my own. And that was one of the things we chose to do on the Maximizer as well.
Right. Really interesting. So you built your own batteries, you got your own inverter, you got your own circuit panel, and you got these little maximizers that attach to the panels themselves. Is that the system? Did I miss
No,
did I miss any pieces?
You got it extremely right. Yes.
And here's a question. Say I live in a place where there is no net metering, where I can't get paid for my excess exports, and I live in a place where there are no VPPs, so I can't get paid for my contribution to whatever. It's just me and my battery. Where does that pencil out? In other words, like, where do you need these extra revenue streams to make this pencil out? Or does it pencil out without those revenue streams? And I guess that will depend on the place.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I think ultimately the good thing about these systems are these are energy generation and storage systems which harvest electrons. You can move things around. That's how I say simply to people. And the benefit of them is very locational dependent, to your point. In places where if the sun shines a lot and electricity prices are high, like California, and the grid is unstable, it's like four benefits in one system. Where literally, I think in California example, it's a no-brainer for any homeowner to get solar storage and smart software like Lunar AI to get the lowest cost of energy. There's so many outages, you get 24/7 power and you never lose power. And the grid is stressed at times, so it pays you for VPP events. And the fourth benefit is, of course, you run off of clean energy. So California happens to be a place, to your point, that all benefits come together, and that's
right.
why
You're
it's
expanding now, though, right? That's what I'm wondering about. Like when you look at a new area,
totally.
What's the sort of minimum viable sort of policy environment?
Yeah. So as we expand, we're expanding into markets with at least three of the four, right? What are the three of the four? The energy prices need to be high.
And variable? Do they need to be varying throughout the day, time dependent price?
Yeah, I think customers buy these things for various reasons. If there are customers who are like, I need this to pencil from day one, meaning if I lease it, my lease cost needs to be lower than the electricity bill. Then if the state has net metering, then obviously the benefit is not as much. But because this product has multi benefits, like you would think that Texas would not be a place where, leaving base power aside, just for solar storage, you would think Texas would not be a place for high deployments because the utility rates are not that high. But it is one of the highest deployment of home batteries in that state because of the fact that outages are quite high. The winter storms, the summer AC usage is quite high. So people want outage protection. And then they're like, well, I'm getting this. Why would I get a generator? And they know that VPP programs are growing. So installers are installing a lot in Texas. Florida, they install because of hurricanes. So in some markets, resilience leads the adoption, and then you get VPPs. And some markets, energy savings leads the adoption. And in some markets, VPPs will lead the adoption.
I would have thought in Texas that arbitrage would have been the lead thing because prices swing so dramatically and widely in Texas. And that price swing is sort of what you need to get that arbitrage value. I would have thought that that would be the primary sort of value stream in Texas.
I would say that it depends on how the product reaches a customer, right? If you go through the installer route, they have no ability to influence arbitrage. So they just sell based on resilience. If you go the energy retailer route, which is what Base Power is doing, then the energy retailer is the one doing the arbitrage. So they use it as a physical hedge. So that is a growing model, definitely agree.
Interesting.
But there is a non arbitrage big demand for Texas, which is just the installer route. People are saying, my electricity bill is rising and the outages are increasing. So let me get solar storage instead of a generator. I think the generator crowd is now realizing this is a much better 24/7 power system.
Interesting.
As compared to getting fuel-based systems.
I wish the data center generator crowd would come to the same realization. One of the subjects we return to a lot around DERs on this pod is the cost of customer acquisition. It's always a huge, when you see the sort of charts of the soft costs facing companies in this space in the US, customer acquisition is always a huge one. How do you think about that? Are you out knocking on doors? Are you trying to sort of draft on sunruns, sort of already high visibility? How do you think about customer acquisition? It's tedious to round them up one at a time. Hey there, everybody. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you about a new mattress or push a credit card on you. This isn't an ad. There are no ads on Volts. It is supported entirely by listeners like you. If you'll indulge me for a second, I'd like to ask for your support. I started Volts because we're all surrounded by depressing news about climate change and misinformation about clean energy, and it's never been more important to share the stories of the real people on the ground doing the real work of transition and all the ingenuity and courage and public spirit they are bringing to it. People are hungry to hear these stories, to learn from and find inspiration in them. I've heard from people who changed majors or careers after hearing episodes of Volts, people using it in classrooms and community groups, even state legislators who have passed bills inspired by specific episodes. Sharing these stories matters. It makes a difference. If you have found value in it and want to help me continue doing it, I hope you will join the community of paid subscribers at volts.wtf. It's about the cost of a cup of coffee a month. If you don't like subscriptions, you can make a one-time contribution, leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or just tell a friend about Volts. I am grateful for any and all support. If you're already a paid subscriber, thank you. And now, back to the show. Are you out knocking on doors? Are you trying to sort of draft on sunruns, sort of already high visibility? How do you think about customer acquisition? It's tedious to round them up one at a time.
I agree. And prior to starting Lunar at my former employer, I also led towards the end, I ran their entire SolarCities sales and deployment platform. And we worked very hard to create a digital experience for customers to really easily buy things online so that you don't have to do door knocking, etc. Having said that, unfortunately, the traditional route to sell these systems is through salespeople making it clear to customers how to buy it. So I do agree that the soft costs are high in the US compared to Australia or other places, and customer acquisition makes it a big part. Where does Lunar believe? How can Lunar contribute to get this to lower? Is we are a product and a technology company. So we provide our products, both hardware and software, hardware, the boxes, to installers, and we then do marketing and sort of brand awareness to make people understand the value of these systems.
Are you doing that to the customers or to the installers? Because it almost seems like installers, in some sense, are your customers.
Correct. We have two customers, the installers who end up reselling the system, but we believe that two customers over time we do some, but we not as a whole lot. We want to continue the brand marketing education as Lunar grows. We have a beautiful app that customers find, and the feedback is this is the best app that gives you full energy understanding of a home better than anybody else. So we believe that will make people who have the Lunar system refer to their customers. How often do you refer an energy system? Very few. But you can now say, this is a great system, guys. You should go try it. So we believe we're going to be like, if you go to look at Samsung, for example, you can't buy Samsung products directly on their website. You got to go to Best Buy to buy them. But Samsung does a lot of marketing to tell people how good their products are and why you should buy them. So we're on that path where we don't sell directly, we go through resellers, at least for now. And we believe that's the right path. And right now, the cost of acquisition is high. The way we can reduce that is by making products really simple. And I cannot emphasize how important is that. One of the reasons why there's a customer acquisition cost high is because people believe these things are very complicated.
Yeah.
And so how you make it simple is important. That'll reduce the customer acquisition cost. And the second one is for the people who you do initially sell, you need to make it super simple on the customer app and show them why these systems are good for show them the savings, accurate savings. And then also through our app, if you buy a Lunar system, you get VPP payments if there's a VPP program in your area, and we pay them through the app on a monthly basis. This is the only product that you buy and you get paid. When more and more people realize that this is how simple it is, that will drop the customer acquisition cost further.
Let's talk software then, because that's obviously a huge piece of this. So one of the things I'm a little hazy on, there's the software that runs your individual system, and you boast that this is AI. Basically, as I understand it, the system is, it's controlling, it's got connection and control of the panels and the battery and the EV charger and whatever, the heat pump, water heater, whatever. And it is monitoring current grid prices, weather conditions, the weather forecast, maybe your past behavior to see when you might be around using lots of power. Basically, like the AI is very smartly managing your power in a way that you claim saves money over and above even competing systems. That's one software bit. And then there's Grid Share, which is the utility level VPP software. Do I have that right?
100%. You have done your research well. Yes.
So let's just start with the AI then, because this is, is this really, because you have these span panels now, like the whole game of managing and controlling residential energy through a single interface. Very big thing, spreading around, a lot of that around. How is it that you can say yours works better or makes homeowners more money? Like, what's the magic sauce there? Is no one else trying to use AI? It seems like a pretty obvious place where machine learning's ability to crunch a lot of numbers from a lot of different sources is very applicable.
Totally. I think I can tell you what we do and how we stand by, and then I can touch upon competitors a little bit as well. I think you described it well, is that this is all machine learning. There was a different name before. Now it's all called AI. There's a little bit of branding there, but essentially these are machine learning algorithms that we run. The first thing we do is, I think the key thing to understand is that you're installing a power plant in a home. A solar storage system is essentially a power plant. And one of the key elements of that, which people sort of don't realize, is that you're measuring the site meter of the home. So you know exactly what in and out the energy is going in the home. The fact that you can measure that and compare that to someone who controls thermostats, for example, those thermostats you're just controlling the device, but you have no idea what the rest of the house is doing. Whereas with a Lunar system, you have all the information. You have generation information, meaning how is the weather going to affect and how much solar you can produce the entire year. Then you have the site information. You know exactly how a home, is it Sunday? Are they having a party? Is it a weekday? You know the entire patterns of the home, which by and large are the same with occasional spikes, of course. And then the third thing is in a place where the utilities are going insane with like hourly or 15-minute different rates, which is where California has gone. Now you have a very good understanding of the import prices that change every hour or every 15 minutes. And in the NEM 3 in California, even the export prices change every 15 minutes. So
Yeah, they have rendered a system where it has to be software
100%.
doing that for you, like a homeowner with like an Excel spreadsheet. There's no way to
There's
keep
no
up
way,
anymore.
exactly. So you get it exactly right. So with these three variables, we have strong forecasting mechanism for solar, for the load based on past behavior, and the utility rate is there. We feed these forecasting into machine learning algorithms. Every day we create a 48-hour plan. Well, plans are always 48 hours. We create out of the 300 or so plans we generate, the constraint is the lowest cost, and the machine learning algorithms go to work. They have a constraint, and they give a 48-hour forward plan to the home. And that plan, after every 30 minutes, we look past the 30 minutes. Did it meet our plan or did it not? Did consumption go up? Did something happen to the weather? And if things are on track, we keep the same plan. If things are not on track, then we change the plan.
And a plan could just be like, I'll charge the EV at this hour and I'll heat up the water in the water heater at this hour. This hour I'll store the solar energy that's coming in the batteries. This hour I'll export it to the
100%.
grid.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
All that kind of stuff. That is the plan, exactly. How do you move the electrons is what I call it, and where do you move them?
And because it's machine learning, it gets better, presumably,
100%.
As it learns about the home's behavior.
Correct. And to your point, the utility rate plan is what it is. There's no learning there, right? It's just published. The solar weather, there's a forecast, but there's some learning there. But the main thing is it learns about the home's behavior, and as time goes by, it gets better at forecasting, unless consumers can be a little fickle sometimes. So, but the main thing is, based on these machine learning algorithms, our deployment of lunar systems in the last year of 2025, we basically put it to test because our simulations were showing this should save a lot more money over self-consumption. Then our customers, rightfully so, they are skeptical until you say, well, show it to me. And when we started deploying our lunar systems, we deployed Lunar AI. And on average, we saved about $450-ish more, $380 to $450 more for a 20 kilowatt hour system in California.
What, relative to a system that is just maximizing self-consumption?
Self-consumption, yes. It doesn't take into the extra benefit you get from self-consumption, which is a big one already. So self-consumption does get you a lot of the benefit over just from the grid power. But to get an extra $350 to $450 just through software is pretty unique.
But that's going to be very market dependent, right?
100%.
That delta is going to be specific to California. All these considerations, unfortunately, as we both understand, it's different in every freaking state. So there's going to be a different set of considerations.
You're 100% right. And I'll go even further. The reason it's so good in California is because the utility rates are so dynamic. And the reason it's so good in Japan, we deploy the same algorithm in Japan where we acquired Moixa, is for the same reason. They have a tariff that changes half hour. The reason this will be great in the UK is because companies like Octopus has an agile tariff that changes every 15 minutes. But we predict that this is the future. We predict this is where utilities are going as they're seeing
dynamic pricing. I mean, dynamic pricing is wild to me that it's not already
everywhere. Yeah,
universal. That's sort of like you can't do anything else.
Correct.
Without that. On the VPP, so you've got this software that's in the consumer side house, this AI that's learning, planning, maximizing value for the consumer. And then you've got this other software called GridShare, which utilities run VPPs with GridShare. So, as I understand it, GridShare, like, you can sell GridShare to a utility without any batteries being involved, like with no any hardware involved at all. Like, this is a freestanding product. The utilities can come to you and say, "Hey, we want to start a VPP. We need some software to manage it. Can we have GridShare?" Is that what GridShare is?
That's correct. And I call it like, instead of a utility facing software, I modify it and say it's an enterprise software, meaning companies use it. The reason
Aggregators.
aggregators, yeah. And the customers could be utilities, but they need not be utilities. Of course, utilities are going to be one of the big customers, but in different markets, you have, even in California, even though it's not a deregulated market, the generation is sort of provided by these community choice aggregators, which are the retailers of California. And so they procure power and they procure clean power. And so we have a contract with three of the major community choice aggregators in California. They're called AVA in the Oakland area, SVCE, and PCE, all in the Bay Area region, where they use Lunar Energy's GridShare software platform as a platform to manage all their distributed energy devices in people's homes in their territory. And their grand plan is to control devices and use DPP or VPP, whatever you want to call it, and reduce their resource adequacy purchases. And down the road, the holy grail is to use them and compare buying day ahead, real time in the Cal ISO market when the FERC rules get fully clarified. So we are at the bleeding edge of now three retailers using us.
I did a pod with Seth of Energy Hub. I'm sure you know Energy Hub,
Yep,
big VPP.
absolutely.
And they came out with a white paper recently about VPPs, about sort of levels of VPP readiness. I'm sure you read the paper. It's super fascinating. But he introduces in that what's called the Hewell's test, which is your VPP convincingly enough mimicking a power plant that a utility can't tell the difference, basically. And it occurs to me, because this is something you said before, but I want to come back and sort of put an underline on it. There are lots of VPPs that are just like, I'm an aggregator aggregating water heaters, whatever. I have 50,000 water heaters.
Yep.
Or I have 50,000 thermostats or whatever. You have 50,000 home systems, right? You're not dealing with individual
devices,
appliances. You're dealing with home systems. So that, it seems to me, would make your VPP comparatively more flexible than an appliance specific VPP. But then this brings me back to these levels of readiness and the Hewell's test. And so I'm sort of wondering, like, are the VPPs you're running, if you have, say, 50,000 installed Lunar systems and you're controlling those whole homes, and all 50,000 of those whole homes are involved in your VPP, does that VPP pass the Hewell's test?
Yeah. So, good of Energy Hub to clarify those levels, just like autonomy levels were clarified by the autonomy companies.
Yeah, right.
So the answer is, so some clarifications and then an answer. For the Lunar Grid Share, reminder that those systems need not be Lunar systems. It could be any battery systems. We're agnostic. We welcome more batteries to come join our platform.
But am I right that a VPP composed of whole home systems would have advantages to a VPP?
I was getting to that 100%. That I actually do believe, and this is what I tell people, that thermostats were the DERs of the last decade. The next decade is going to be all about whole home systems, because that's where really the utilities can make sure that this is a true power plant ready to either shed load when I want to, export energy when I want to, and it co-optimizes based on the consumer sort of each home level's performance. So if I have 10,000 homes that I am optimizing, one way to do it is I want 2 kilowatt hours from every home and be a dumb VPP provider that just provides raw capacity or frequency, whatever. Or the other ways to do what Lunar does is like we look at each home on a case by case basis. And every home is a snowflake here again. In some home, the consumption could be low. The batteries could be at 90% SOC. You could actually get 8 kilowatt hours from the home without disturbing the home economics. That co-optimization is what is the level 3 or even level 4, which is what the grid needs. So I would describe that levels into two ways. One is what can your devices do? And in that case, I think we're as good as level 4. Our devices with our software and even other devices can do a lot. We can co-optimize, latency is pretty quick, we can provide, and we've shown last year with the DSGS program.
Telemetry, got to throw telemetry in there. Got the fast telemetry.
The fast telemetry and the latency is pretty low. So that part we're pretty good at, and the fact that we do whole home tells you that we are in that level 3, level 4.
Mm-hmm.
The next part is how well are you integrated with the grid side on the the grid DERMS or the grid control systems, the SCADA systems of the grid. Now that I would say Lunar hasn't done that part well. We excel on the device and the home battery side, and we work with partners. But we need a little bit more willingness from utilities to go all the way and connect with their Schneider systems or their SCADA systems so that in the control room, a grid operator can just give a signal and then these devices show up. But the devices will show up, and we have a full platform that does that day in, day out.
And that will just be utilities gaining some experience with this, right? Just doing it a little bit more, right?
I think I would say they have a lot of experience because, again, VPPs or DPPs have been around for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
There has been a lack of belief that these devices will be there.
Well, the tech is leaps
there.
And bounds from just even a few years ago.
Yeah, I'll give you two examples which I think will highlight to you why the game is changing and utilities are realizing how powerful this can be. One example is, Seth might have mentioned this, in California last year, the DSGS program, Sunrun alone dispatched about 500 megawatts of home batteries. And this was the first time the number reached, triple digit megawatts and almost 500 megawatts. Lunar dispatched about 130 megawatts of those because all the non-Tesla batteries were dispatched by us, and Tesla does their own dispatch. So that number last year was 500. In 2024, it was less than 100. In 2023, it was like 5 megawatts. So I think that realization, even the state, even the PUC, and this California Energy Commission is now like, wow, that's real scale.
When do you think California will hit a gig? Next year, 2 years?
I think they could hit a gig next year easily.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if the DSGS funding is now in question, as you know, they're trying to figure that out. But I was speaking to somebody at the CEC, and they're big believers. They're like, this is really proven that this can actually, you don't have to build more peaker plants. This is 2 gigawatts of capacity.
Good grief. Here's a couple of sort of semi-skeptical questions about the VPP angle. I think they're sort of related. This is something I've always sort of wondered about. So if you're controlling, say, 10,000 Texas homes in a particular region, isn't it going to be the case that the consumption profiles of those homes are going to be substantially correlated? In other words, like they're all going to have spare capacity at the same hour, and they're all going to be using their full capacity at the same hour. Do you know what I mean? There's just not a lot of, is there enough differentiation to give you sort of the variety you need to cover? Do you not end up with a bunch of highly correlated households, which sort of takes away a little bit of the value? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I see your point that if it's a hot summer day, everybody's going to turn on an AC.
Right.
Especially if you're deploying systems in a location. I think that could be true, but the amplitude of consumption definitely could be different depending on the number of people in the home and how big the family is or how big the home is. And we've definitely seen that repeatedly. Like if we have now thousands of systems deployed, again, last year was California, this year we're expanding to Texas and other states, and we see so much variability even in the same region
Interesting.
because of the load depends on not just the weather and the time of the year, it also depends on the people living in the house and how big the home is
Sure.
and how small the home is. So literally it's quite fascinating. There are homes which are such efficient homes, they consume very little energy, and the next door neighbor could be like, a very inefficient home and it consumes 5 times more, has two EVs, has different loads in the house. So it is, I would say you're partially correct, but the consumption patterns change quite a bit at a home level.
Got it. A related question. So in Texas, the big value here is arbitrage, as we say. Texas has this energy only market, which means that prices are close to real time and they fluctuate pretty wildly depending on when things happen. So this is a perfect market for arbitrage. But then here comes base, here comes Lunar installing batteries at this crazy pace. Is it not the case that with each battery you install, you incrementally reduce the amount of arbitrage available? Do you know what I mean? Between you and base, are you not going to arbitrage yourselves down to a basically flat demand line, at which point your business will be gone? In other words, are you not like, I'm curious how your investors think about this too, because either your investors think that that's not going to be a problem, or they think you're not going to solve it. You know what I mean? Like, what do they?
Or everybody thinks that the problem is so big it's going to take many years before. And I think that's the answer, is that I agree with you. If fundamentally, if every home had a battery magically tomorrow, then your volatility is significantly reduced. And then your business model is at risk. So that's why Lunar's business model is that there are different business models that we continue to find, but it's a far route away from volatility being reduced. The other thing on the Texas thing that we should talk about is that maybe you already know this, and I'm sure you do. When you deploy batteries without solar in Texas, you are importing energy to charge the batteries. You are paying the T&D charges to CenterPoint. Those are not forgiven, and those still remain. And even though you export energy back, the T&D charges don't get canceled out. So the ideal retailer model in Texas would be to have a solar storage offering combined. That then becomes again a true distributed power plant where then it's a physical hedge as a retailer. So I think conceptually what you described is correct. I believe it's going to take a long time before the volatility just drops. The other factor is, the weather is the wild card because it keeps continuing to surprise us. Last couple of years were quiet. This year has been a bit volatile already. But
yes, that's not getting less volatile over time. That's for sure.
Totally.
Well, let me return to a couple things you said before time together. So you, as I understand it, if I am in California and I want to buy from Sunrun a solar system with a Lunar battery system attached, all told, it's in the order of $20,000 to $30,000. Is that roughly?
So Sunrun, 99% of their sales now are not upfront sales. They lease the system. So and in fact, not just Sunrun now, most installers have moved to a leasing model where the price that they charge for leasing a solar and a lunar system is going to be lower than what they paid the utility before getting the lease system. So if you paid $300 a month for your electricity bill, most likely your lunar and solar system will be between $200 to $300. It'll be lower. So the customer feels, well, I'm paying day zero, lower costs. There's no upfront cost.
You're saving money from
the get-go.
And do you eventually own that? Is that how these leasing things work?
I guess I think this is a 25-year lease. So there's eventually, after a certain period, yes, you can buy them back.
Right.
But essentially, if you think about it from the perspective of a lease provider like Sunrun or others, because they get to control the system, they get to participate these systems in different virtual power plants. So there's less incentive for them to give it back to the customer because they're now, again, power plants assets that they can now lend to the bigger power plant, the grid operator. So I think Base is doing a similar model in Texas. They're like, we'll just put the devices and own them. Sunrun does that. Lunar's not gone on that model yet, where we're not taking the full risk of owning the assets. We're still a technology provider. We believe this is the better model to partner with every lease provider, every energy retailer.
Wait, so is Sunrun leasing to the customer
Correct.
the solar panels and your system?
Correct.
Your system is included in the lease.
Yes.
Got it. And so, I mean, this gets back to customer acquisition a little bit, I guess, but like one of the things I've been obsessed with on this podcast now for a couple of years is over and over again, we have this distributed energy that has all these benefits. Installing batteries in homes has all these benefits, but there's like this missing money problem. The sort of social and regulatory system we have set up does not value those things correctly, and so they don't sort of sell as fast as they might in a perfect market or whatever. And so I constantly wonder, where can we find that money? It occurs to me, every time you install a solar plus lunar system on a home, you are creating a little increment of grid capacity, right? Which you then manage as your VPP. Well, guess who desperately needs grid capacity? Maybe you've heard, maybe you've read the news.
Data centers.
Maybe you've picked up a newspaper recently, right? We have all these data centers, all these hyperscalers that desperately need grid capacity and have giant bags of money and are willing to pay virtually any price to get on the grid as fast as possible. And here you have a machine for creating grid capacity. Now, I'm no financial genius, but like, you need the money, they've got the money. Surely we can work something out. Like, surely there's some way to set up a system where the hyperscalers who want grid capacity pay for the VPP capacity that you are creating. Then you can go to customers and just say, we'll just do this for free, right? Furthermore, you could go to customers and say this data center that wants to hook up outside of town is paying for this system for you. What a great bit of PR for the data center, for the hyperscaler, a free system for the customer, a better operating grid, more, win, 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 everybody wins. Have you discussed such a thing with any hyperscaler? Is this a gleam in your eye? Is this something that people are talking about?
Yeah, again, you're spot on. We are having several such conversations with the hyperscalers, exactly how you describe. You nailed it. It is a win-win for everybody. And the fact that you can deploy this capacity much faster than interconnecting a gigawatt power plant. In 2 years, you can deploy, or even less than that, deploy these systems. And then the moment they get deployed, software can start controlling them. So I think it is exactly the win-win benefit you describe. Obviously, I can't describe the detailed discussions we're having. The challenge, and I think it's a challenge we'll overcome. It's a little bit around, if it was a deregulated market like in Texas, it would be different.
Mm-hmm.
But then because you have a utility who has to benefit the customer, the rate billing for the customer happens to the utility, it becomes a tri-party negotiation, which is not a challenge. It just takes a bit longer, where if PG&E is the utility provider for the data center and also the customers in that region, then you need a tri-party deal between the hyperscaler, utility, and someone like that. And then what is the mechanism? Where does a credit go? Does it go on the bill? Or do you get paid? Is there an upfront system? Who owns the system? So I 100% agree, and I hope Lunar is one of the companies, and I'm sure we will be one of the companies who will announce something like this, hopefully soon. We are working behind the scenes, but I 100% agree that this is a way to add grid capacity that people haven't been focused on. It's all the, let's put more nuclear, let's put more gas. upfront, which is great, but it's going to take 10 years.
But it turns out no matter how much money you have, you can't magic up a gas plant before 2030, no matter how much money you have. Like, it just seems to me the circumstances are inexorably pushing them in this direction.
I think I fully agree with that. The last thing I would say as we end is that we have already shown a model. We did a program with PG&E called the SAVE program through Sunrun, where Sunrun deployed a bunch of home batteries, which Lunar grid share controlled. And they were deployed in areas where the distribution transformers were heavily congested. So PG&E gave us the data, and there were a bunch of home batteries there, and we would give them a forecasted capacity every day and say, in this region there's so many batteries with capacity. They would then return us with a load shape of the transformer saying, this day this transformer is going to be loaded. Then we would go and shave off that peak with home batteries with our software.
Amazing.
So we've done that, and that same model needs to be applied in like gigawatt scale to hyperscalers, and then it's a win-win for everybody, like you said.
You've got this system, it's whole and complete, ready to be installed in households. I'm wondering if there's an obvious next product for you, or if you're focused on just selling at this point.
I think it's it's both. I'm always selling, always focused on expanding our systems to all over the country. That's number one priority. In addition, we continue to innovate. We're innovating on two fronts. Obviously, reducing cost is also innovation. So we're focusing on getting our products at much lower cost. Second innovation is, to your point, I think of charging as a next frontier before we do heating and cooling, but generation, storage, control, and charging.
That gets you most of it, right?
That gets you most of it, exactly.
The EV charging is the big.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but doing the AC charging level 2 is pretty boring and not boring. There are 100,000 chargers out there. So we're focused on how do we do high power DC charging, supercharging for the home.
Oh, interesting.
And also combine vehicle to home and vehicle to grid. So we can talk a little bit more about that as we release that, but it's not going to be a run-of-the-mill charging solution. It's going to be differentiated that customers feel adds a lot more value to their home, and also if they have an EV next to it.
Interesting. I mean, it seems like in terms of the regulatory and legal environment, at the very least, you have a lot of runway. You're out installing systems and things are a go. I wonder if there are obvious, when you think about policy, when you think about policymakers, making things easier for VPPs, are there obvious asks of policymakers? Is there a big thing that you would like policymakers to do, or is it incremental things, or are you worried about policy at all?
Oh, of course. I think policy is a big, this is a regulated industry by and large.
Yes.
So there's a huge impact on policy. I would say on the VPP side or the energy market side, the thing that I would want as a magic wand solution is rapid implementation of FERC 2222. Different ISOs have implemented it at a different level.
Catch us up on which one that is.
So FERC 2222 is a ruling that lets behind the meter assets participate directly in the wholesale markets. Now imagine if every home were to be able to bid directly in the wholesale market, you would be able to use software in a much more free manner as compared to having these bespoke VPP programs, which are bilateral and specialized funds coming from utilities and CEC, et cetera. So that FERC has passed that ruling. Different ISOs are taking their sweet time to implement it. California ISO has done it. I think there's a few others that have done it, but not to the full extent. But I want the free markets to be allowed to really play in such that then you'll see a lot more deployment of home batteries because now they can really trade directly with the wholesale market. So that's one.
Let me ask about this. Don't you worry that a situation in which every household is a participant in a wholesale market gets you something like a computational overload? Do you know what I mean? Like, that seems very difficult to manage. And I wonder how you think about the sentiment that I hear a lot, that we need to sort of devolve some of this down to local markets, have DSOs, have local markets that then can just be treated as kind of a unit by the wholesale market, rather than the wholesale market trying to reach down its tentacles into every individual household. Don't you think we're going to break wholesale markets if we try to move from a situation where they have, from 1,000 participants to, millions?
To be clear, when I say each home should be participating, the homeowner itself is never going to be
It'll
interested,
be
or that
automatic. I mean,
it'll
yeah.
be an aggregator, and it'll be an aggregator who aggregates. The margins are not going to be very high for an aggregator unless they have significant capacity. So I would imagine the number of participants is not going to increase, and the ISOs are going to see an aggregate capacity, not these individual homes doing it. So I'm not worried about overloading the ISO. I think it's just going to end up having whoever has the best, to your point, software and able to aggregate a bunch of homes, like maybe Sunrun does well there because they have leasing models and they own all these assets. That's one part. Although I do agree with you that DSOs or a local market would be a lot more efficient because you're now also dealing with distribution level impacts, which are different from the overall ISO level. So that part I do agree. But in terms of every home becoming a participant and the negative impacts, I actually don't see a whole lot. I think it's just going to be beneficial because then you truly use the existing capacity of the grid as opposed to always believing that you have to overbuild the grid, 3 times by putting everything centralized. I think that part
Yeah.
is where what I feel concerned about is like we shouldn't always build our way out of things by just building more. And this allows you to use the existing capacity in a much more
A very
efficient manner.
live argument. Don't you sort of feel like the logical endpoint of this is that the utilities will be the aggregators? Like, I'm sort of wondering how enduring the role of third-party aggregators is going to be. It seems to me like the logic of this eventually is that the utility will just do that as part of its utility,
Yeah. I'm a big believer that I'm here to make this technology real and possible. And how it happens, it can take various forms. I'm actually surprised, to your point, surprised and not surprised at why no utility has, till the last 20 years, not decided we will own and deploy systems because these are our customers. We have the most data about them, and I can give the most efficient system and control them. I do think that's the logical endpoint, but the fact that they're so hesitant to do anything behind the meter and they're so used to doing things front of the meter, I wonder if that will change. Now, you must have seen there was a RFI by PG&E talking about rate basing 5,000 batteries for the first time. So that's a big step up, exactly
yes.
how you described.
This is a distributed, we did a pod on this too with Pierre Lafarge. It's a distributed capacity procurement, DCP.
Correct.
Basically, like as you say, the utility knows where
The constraints are,
these
yeah.
DER systems will do the most good.
Correct.
So there is a logic to them sort of directing where they're constructed.
I agree with you. I think that would be and look, again, my point was that Lunar is a technology provider.
Right.
If we need to provide the technology to aggregators, we'll do that. If we need to provide it to utilities, we'll do that. Our job is to make it very, very easy to both deploy systems and control them. And then while we will play a role in shaping the business model, we're also happy to go along with where the business model goes.
Right.
Yeah.
So listeners want one of these. Right now you're selling in California. Next step is Texas and Delaware. What's how soon before we're nationwide?
So we're expanding to 8 more states this year. There are Texas, Utah, Nevada, New Jersey, and a few other we're making plans for. And we'll be nationwide by next year. Right now, we're a bit capacity constrained. We are expanding our manufacturing. We're fully assembling our products in North America. We're domestic content qualified.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, about your batteries. So you don't have the foreign content rules, all that nonsense, all that mess.
Yeah.
Are you skating around that basically?
Well, I wouldn't say skating around that. We're good because we believed in making in the US from day one. Even
Interesting.
our foundation before IRA.
Even all the materials and the like, that's the challenge.
Yeah, so you're right. Can you make 100% supply chain free of foreign content? That's hard.
Yeah.
But can you start with assembling your products in the US?
Yeah,
And yes, we did that from day one. We have 2 contract manufacturers in Georgia and Washington where we build our inverters, maximizers, the battery modules, all in the US. We are not a prohibited foreign entity like many of our competitors. So we're fully non-FIOC as well as domestic content, and so people using our products can get the full ITC up to even 50% with 30% ITC base, 10% domestic content, and then 10% for energy communities.
And that's still in place through like when are they cutting that
That
one
one
off?
is in place till 2033.
Oh.
But it is for, as you may know, it is for companies who lease systems. It is not for individual homeowners. So if you buy the system, you don't get those ITC rebates. But if you lease a system, the leasing company gets that and they factor that in your reduced lease payment. So that's why the industry is shifting heavily from buying to leasing. So as your customers wanting these systems, they would most probably be getting a pretty attractive lease price.
Kunal, this has just been absolutely fascinating. As you can tell, I could probably go on another hour. I think this is things are changing so quickly in this area. It's really fascinating to watch. Thank you for coming on and walking us through it.
Thank you, David. You're very well researched. I've listened to your stuff before, and this is fantastic because you go pretty deep, and I like it that way. So that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to Volts. It takes a village to make this podcast work. Shout out especially to my super producer, Kyle McDonald, who makes me and my guests sound smart every week. And it is all supported entirely by listeners like you. So if you value conversations like this, please consider joining our community of paid subscribers at volts.wtf, or leaving a nice review, or telling a friend about Volts, or all three. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.